Yeah, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay. And I guess, we've got the catch-all condition about plans that Ms. Wallace referenced in our earlier discussion, because I see and a recital E to do with the mitigation measures from the EIR. So I suppose based on the same rationale, we wouldn't need to go to the trouble of including new and specified conditions to do with our approval of those materials. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but otherwise I'm just going to move on and open the discussion, board discussion regarding the substance, including the landmark alteration permit, which includes the demolition and also the new construction. I would like to go first, please, to Board Member Groningen.
Gee, thanks. Basically, I'm really guided by the previous actions of the Planning Commission and the City Council. And in particular, I'm reading from page 16 of 26 of the staff report, just the section that talks about the implementation of mitigation measures, CUL-1 through CUL-4, that have come to us as part of this action, that where they said, City Council, I believe it was, that would partially mitigate the negative impact of the historic resources. These mitigation measures would not fully reduce the impact or level significant. As such, the demolition of two historic structures at the project site would result in a significant and unavoidable impact. However, on March 3rd, 2020, the City Council here determined that the benefits of providing homeless services, more homeless families, affordable housing sited near the downtown transit mall, smart station, and supporting of creating new jobs outweigh the risk and adverse environmental impact of the project, and determine that the project's significant unavoidable impacts are acceptable. And so I stand with that language from the city. And the only other comment, if we're to comment on, I think on three items, Chair Edmondson, would be that, as I indicated earlier, I think I expected more in a discussion about the, what did they call them, those, basically materials for the project or for the district.
Can I just interject, Board Member Groningen, in terms of our personal reactions or feelings about those materials? I think now would be the suitable time to share those. And if you have questions for the applicant or staff that haven't had occasion or opportunity to ask before, perfectly appropriate to ask that now, because I'm sure the applicant would like us to make a decision on those materials so that regardless of our decision, they ideally wouldn't have to come back before us or what have you. So be happy to get into that.
Yeah, my question is just merely, can you give us more information about what we're looking at here in terms of those materials?
So I think Amber was the team member. I don't know who had to leave, or Ms. Grady, Amber Grady, spoke during the applicant presentation about the interpretive materials. So the applicant team, you have the floor, and please go ahead with any kind of feedback you have for Board Member Groningen.
Okay. Yes, this is Amber Grady. Thank you for the question. Did you have specific questions on one of the materials? I know there are two mitigation measure items that are before you tonight. One with regards to the interpretive materials and the other with regards to the compatibility of the design. Did you have specific questions about the interpretive panel or anything else? Or did you just want me to elaborate a little bit?
A little clarity, a little more information about the interpretive materials.
Okay. The interpretive materials, the panel, the graphic that was up earlier, the design of that and placement and materials that that'll be made out of are guided by National Park Service wayfinding guidelines. So it'll be weather resistant. It'll be really built to stand up to the elements. And oh, thank you for the graphic. And based on the language in the mitigation measure, we've tried to provide a comprehensive history of the site to anyone who was passing by and wanted to learn more about the history of Santa Rosa, the original town site there, and the preservation district. So that's why we have included all these different elements on the panel. And the mitigation measure specifically dictates where those will be located. It will be the entrance to Catholic Charities, the Catholic Charities area, which I would interpret to mean, although we're open to suggestion, I believe I would defer to the Catholic Charities about deferring location. But I had assumed that meant the center. Two would be the home's entrance, so that would be along 7th Street, where you have the main access point for the homes, and then the entrance to the parking area. So the mitigation measure specifically dictates that it would be located in those 3 areas. Does that help a little bit? Do you have follow-up questions?
No, no further questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Board Member Groningen, do you have any further comments about any of the matters under consideration in the resolution?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Board Member Muser, if you're ready, please.
You know, someone said tonight, exception to the rule. And for us, that's kind of where I feel that our purpose and our role towards historic neighborhoods, this is a pretty big exception. I've gone through all the mitigating factors, and you know, arguments have been made, but I think they're pretty weak arguments. But somebody else also said tonight, you know, think about voting with your heart. And I think the reason why we have a board is for these exceptions to the rule. If this was an expansion of the mall or just a general commercial structure, there'd be no way that I could support it. But then looking at what it is, what it'll do, what it'll serve our community, here comes that exception term again. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that. That's the only comments I have at this time.
Thank you, Board Member Muser. Next, Board Member McHugh, any comments or further questions, I suppose, either way?
Well, I'm supportive of the project, and I believe that the applicants have done the best they can to try to adapt the structures into the district. I recognize that we have an issue with respect to the demolition of contributing structures, but because of the fact that this is on a panhandle and not, I see that is not really having that much of an effect on the district as a whole. I'm willing to support that. Were those structures somewhere else in the district? Maybe not. But I believe that the project is worthwhile. It is something that the community needs. Haven't really heard any strong opposition. And so I'm inclined to support the project. And those are my comments.
Thank you very much, Board Member McHugh. Board Member DeBalker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me all right?
I can, yes.
Great, thank you. All right. Where to begin? I am sensitive to the need for the project. As a matter of fact, my team is the ones who put together the 60 units that went in at Los Guilicos for the homeless in 3 weeks, including showers, laundry facilities, 2 separate dog parks, nice dogs and bad dogs, medical facilities, job service things, all put in place for them for 3 weeks, in 3 weeks. And now the team is going to be converting them to permanent residences at the direction of the county. So I'm very sensitive to the need, and I've been out to those sites many times with the people that are being served there. That said, we're not the Design Review Board. We're not the City Council. We're not the Planning Commission. We're the Cultural Heritage Board. We have a job. Our job is carefully defined for us. I'd like to go ahead and read 4 brief paragraphs, if I could, on that. Let's start with this is the Santa Rosa Design Guidelines, Section 4.7, Historic Districts. Section 3, Design Guidelines. Subsection C, Demolition. The demolition of landmarks or contributing buildings located within preservation districts may be restricted by state and city law and should not ordinarily be considered by the board unless there are unusual circumstances surrounding the proposed demolition. Moving to another document. This is the Processing Review Guidelines for Owners in Historic Properties, Part 2, Section 1, Design Guidelines for Historic Properties, Section C, Design Guidelines, Demolition. The primary purpose of designating landmarks and preservation districts is to preserve Santa Rosa's architectural and cultural history for future generations. The proposed demolition of landmarks or structures located within preservation districts is inconsistent with this purpose and is therefore inappropriate. Demolition of historic resources may also be inconsistent with state preservation law, see Part 1, CEQA, and historic resources. Then it goes on to give some guidelines, and I'll read 2 more paragraphs here. Non-contributing buildings, of which 4 have already been demolished by staff action and permit without going to the board. A building which does not contribute to the integrity of the preservation district, of which they're proposing to demolish, I believe, 4 more, and with 2 contributors. But this is non-contributors. A building which does not contribute to the integrity of preservation district, shown as non-contributing buildings on the official map for the district, may be considered for demolition, provided that an appropriate replacement building, one whose design is consistent with the guidelines for new construction, or interim site and landscape improvements are proposed. The intent of this situation is to avoid the introduction of vacant and unimproved lots, which we're already seeing on the site with the 4 previous demolitions, and unimproved lot into an established neighborhood which would detract from the neighborhood streetscape. In this case, the proposed demolition and its replacement will require a public hearing, review, and approval by the Cultural Heritage Board. So far, 4 buildings have been demoed out there without approval by the Cultural Heritage Board. It talks about then landmarks and contributing buildings within a district. As stated above, the demolition of landmarks or contributing buildings located within preservation districts may be inconsistent with state and city law and should not ordinarily be considered unless there are unusual circumstances surrounding the proposed demolition, such as an earthquake and the buildings are structurally unsound and an imminent threat to the public. That's paraphrased. In such cases, the Cultural Heritage Board will review and may approve demolition provided that an appropriate mitigation measures are proposed which reduce the significant aspects of the demolition project to insignificance. The Cultural Heritage Board will determine the degree of mitigation that is appropriate on a case-by-case basis. For example, a single modest mitigation measure may be appropriate for a marginal dilapidated structure which barely contributes to the district. In contrast, a number of extensive mitigation measures may be needed when a property which is significant to a district is proposed for demolition. I think this is pretty clear on what's expected of us on the demolition of these properties. Mitigation measures, even for the non-contributors, is to relocate the building. There is no mitigation measure for a contributing building, even to be moved from the site or demolished. It has to be rebuilt, reconstructed, or another building somewhere in town needs to be refurbished in its stead. That's kind of where I'm going to go with the general guidelines that I'm going to be looking at today. I have a couple of things we can go with here. First is a real softball issue for the resolution itself. It's a friendly amendment I would like to propose. And it addresses some of the lack of clarity on the language. At the very end, there was the issue about the confusion over the dates of the drawings that the chair brought up. So now the under therefore be it resolved section at the end, item 2, I would propose a friendly amendment that the sentence read after the phrase Cultural Heritage Board, remove the comma and add the word and. That would make it read, obtain a building permit consistent with the plans approved by the Cultural Heritage Board and dated May 27th, 2020. Now that should remove the question about that one. I have a question for staff next, and that is the council has put forward 2 specific mitigation measures for us to consider. Question to staff is, can the board seek additional mitigation measures? Is staff able to respond to that?
Yes.
Hi.
Okay.
Ashley Crocker, I am going to defer to her on this one.
Hi there. We cannot add additional mitigation measures to the mitigation monitoring plan, which folds into the EIR that was already approved and certified by the council, along with the findings of fact.
Thank you for the response. I do find that a couple of plaques and a pair of pylons at the entrance to be, and you may quote me, wholly inadequate to mitigate the damage of the removal of a block of a historic district and putting in an outscaled, overwhelming structure that has no textural, rhythmical, or relationship to any other aspect of the historic district. I just have a very severe problem with that. So I think this problem goes to the first principles for the purpose of our board. If we can approve this, what can't we be asked to approve? The bottom line on this is, should we hold our integrity and follow our guidelines, which is what our job is, and vote no on this, we're going to be overruled. We know that. That's a certainty. But I'm not willing to compromise on that aspect. I feel I must do my job that I was appointed to do. And that comes with being overruled from time to time. I get that. I was hoping that we would be able to add some mitigation measures that would then help reduce the impact on our community of this horrific precedent of approving demolition of a historic district to put in work that is not consistent with going back into the district. I was hoping that we were going to be able to get some money to do some long overdue historic surveys. Our surveys are 30 years old. We've added Roseland to the district, and the whole era of mid-century modern has not yet been surveyed in this town. And that was a very important aspect to our city fathers. I was hoping that we were going to be able to get some money to do some survey work. It sounds like that's not an option. Therefore, I think that we're being asked to make a determination on whether the removal of the remaining contributing and non-contributing buildings on this block and the replacement with the proposed structure is appropriate and consistent with the historic district, which is our mandate. And I'm just going to leave the issue at that. Thank you.
Chair Edmondson, this is Bill Rose. If I may just add one clarification to Board Member DeBakker's comments. I think I want to just point out and clarify some of the terms that we're using. So the question was, can we introduce new mitigations? As Ms. Crocker indicated, the answer is no. Those are part of the certified EIR. But I think as Board Member DeBakker went on further and commented on the interpretive materials, I think that it is within the board's purview to add some modifications to those. And so I think it's a difference in terms and terminologies. Mitigation means something quite significant in CEQA. So I just wanted to offer that clarification.
Yeah, I think that's a great clarification, and it must be that, if you have the power to approve and therefore the power to deny, then typically it includes lesser powers, like power recommending changes. So that makes perfect sense to me. Any other immediate follow-ups to any of Board Member DeBakker's comments before I seek further comment from the board? And that's a question to staff.
No further comments. The only friendly amendment I had, I think, was a grammatical change. So I don't see a need at this point, unless there's other conditions or comments to discuss with the applicant, even because the motion is for the project that's on the table.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rose. Board Member Garrett, please.
I support everything that Mark said. Unfortunately, I misunderstood how the vote was going to work. I am probably not going to be able to support this landmark alteration as it flies in the face of everything that we are supposed to be supportive of. If I could recall my vote on the previous roll call, I would. I find it extremely frustrating that our hands were tied with this project. I feel like we were tied by probably a city council. But our directive is to support historic preservation and to ensure that the historic character of a neighborhood is maintained. And we are, by voting for this landmark alteration, we are voting against what we're supposed to be accomplishing. I agree that if we can add to the mitigations, we should request that the building at 520 Morgan and 608 Morgan be moved within the district as part of the mitigation. I guess that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Garrett and Vice Chair Fennell. Any comments or questions at this time?
Yeah, I am so glad that Cappy and Mark were able to speak before me because they put it very eloquently. And it was like I was saying earlier, I think this just flies in the face of what we as a board are asked to do. And I think that we all know that this project is going to go forward and it will happen, but it has to happen by another body. It has to be the city council that takes the hit on this. It has to be someone else that makes that decision, because to do so is to take away everything that we as a board are supposed to be doing. And I am conflicted. This is a block of homes that the battle should have been fought maybe 10 or 15 years ago for them. And it would have done them much better to have had that battle 10 or 15 years ago, but it didn't happen. But I can't take my mandate as a cultural heritage board member and I think it's a slippery slope. If we can do this, then what can we not be asked to do later in another district in another time? I fully understand that this is going to go through, but it has to go through without my support, and it should happen by the city council. It should happen by planning, whoever, but it shouldn't happen at this level. It should never have come to us. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, messing up my mute button. Thank you, Vice Chair Fennell. So I am sympathetic to all of the critical comments and the comments about the charge of the board, but I'm also, I see a different indication in the statutes that we're charged with and in the design guidelines. To me, I think, quite frankly, the design guidelines are not written in a legally sound, consistent way, and there are obvious inconsistencies to some of them. But what's clear to me from our landmark alteration zoning code sections is that demolition is assessed with reference to the same criteria as other changes to the extent applicable. And then when you list the criteria, many of them apply to projects other than demolition, quite clearly. Some of these findings just couldn't be made as a logical matter with reference to demolition. I think that the only one that screams out is whether the proposed change will destroy or adversely affect an important architectural feature or features. And I think that it certainly is going to destroy those significant buildings. There's no doubt about it. And we are to consider those criteria. So the city council knows how to prohibit something if they want to, and they deliberately chose to have demolition be, and it says demolition of landmarks, any structure, building, or significant feature within a preservation district. CHB, based upon the evidence presented and the criteria for decisions in subsection G, may by resolution, et cetera, et cetera. So there is no building by that code standard that could not be destroyed. And obviously, there are good reasons and valid reasons not to do it. But I decidedly disagree that it's beyond our power. And I think that there was a lot of concern in the comments that I heard about a limiting principle. If we approve this, what wouldn't we approve? And I think that's why it's so important to make reference to the unique aspects of a demolition of those structures in that place. The key for me is something that I brought up in the concepts, at the concept stage, which is the the diminished impact on the rest of the historic districts and the surrounding, areas of the city of these particular demolitions due to the little peninsula that of the district that they're on. For me, I don't think that this sets a precedent that the Empire Building is next. I really don't. I don't see them as comparable. I don't see it as a precedent that is in any way going to be binding on future boards. I think that there are meaningful ways to distinguish the negative impacts of these, demolitions of significant historical structures, that it can be distinguished in this case from, and I think the analysis in the report went into this, the historical resources report, that it's not comparable to me to a demolition on a block that is, chock full of contributors and landmarks that's right in the heart of the historic district. And I think that we've got unique considerations. The design guidelines, without a doubt, discourage demolition. They say it should not ordinarily be considered, as Board Member DeBacher said. Once again, though, that very clearly makes it, leaves it permissible. So what I don't mean to say that, if a board member can't make the necessary findings, that's, an unwarranted point of view. But I just wholeheartedly disagree that it's any less, within our charge to approve the demolition of significant structures, because it's plain as day to me that it is permissible. And so I think the real question is, are these particular demos of the sort that, the city council had in mind when they passed this law, that, would be the ones that the board could make the findings in connection with, or are they the ones that are, beyond the pale and, we can consider but shouldn't approve? And to me, these structures are kind of isolated. They have, the neighborhood around them has changed a great deal over time. And for those reasons, the impact on the fabric of our history and our architectural history is mitigated, to use a word, by the context and the circumstances. And I would also, this is not necessarily germane to the demolition itself, but here the demolitions are necessary for the design as presented. Now, that's not determinative of anything, but I think that, we are also reviewing the new construction. And for me, the history was fascinating to read the history of this site. The mixed income, mixed profession, sociology of the area, the fact of its long history of medical and medical related care uses, and the prospect of being able to preserve the historic use is something that is valued under our guidelines and our code. And it's significant to me that we are not approving, as I think, or not being asked to approve, as I think Board Member Muser said, an expansion of the mall. It's not going to be, an auto parts store or anything like that. It's going to be very much in the character of what's been there historically. And I think to sort of block a project that really preserves that not so much architectural, but very much physical aspect of the city, it would be a shame to sort of let the historic character of the neighborhood erode in ways that are hard to visualize for the sake of history that is easier to visualize and nonetheless important. But that's how I see the issue. And, I have given consideration to all of the matters required under the code. and I believe that supporting this project is entirely proper and within my discretion, and I'm in support of the project. So that is it for my comments, and I suppose I will, I'll reopen it to all the board members, but just go to staff first for any kind of comments.
This is Bill Rose. Thank you, Chair Edmondson, and to all the members for their comments and for sticking this out. I think we all anticipated a long meeting, and we certainly didn't disappoint. I think all the points are well taken. The one thing that we should probably consider is the approval of the interpretive materials and the gateway monuments. One way that the board may consider doing that is to put it in as a whereas. So simply, it's just acknowledging that the board did, in fact, review, consider, and approve, if that's ultimately the way the vote goes tonight. So, so that would be one.
Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
And I think that's really my final suggestion, actually.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I got kind of lost in the bigger issues and I forgot to address those. I don't have any objection per se to the Gateway Monument and you know, the sort of material aspects of it related to that particular condition of approval. You know, they're not particularly substantial, but you know, for what they are, I think they're fine. The interpretive materials, I think, you know, I really am not interested in redlining this document and occasioning the need to come back before the board. But I do think that, you know, this thing would have to be pretty enormous for this text to be of interest or of note to the public. I think it's a little bit of a crowded graphic. And I also think that the city council, the way I read that mitigation measure is that it might not be that the exact same interpretive material used in 3 places is what they had in mind. I'm not sure that's the case. And also, certainly, you know, the big sacrifices that would be made were this to be approved. You know, the block is being redeveloped, and there was the discussion certainly of the demolitions that didn't come before us for a permit. You know, I think it's a little bit troubling. Quite frankly, the way that happens, and I don't express an opinion about it. But in terms of its legal sufficiency, you know, it's of no moment for our purposes here, because we're not approving a permit to ratify those demolitions. It's simply not an issue. If it's wrongful, then the city can enforce its rights against the wrongful demolition, and the city approved the permit in the first place. So the fact of the matter is, I just think it's not germane to these demolitions that would occur going forward, but it's mainly the same consideration. And the structures with the most historic value, 520 and 608, you know, for them to, for photos of them to consume, you know, maybe less than 10% of the surface area of the interpretive materials, 1 photograph of each, I'm not sure it does justice to the visual nature of what would be gone. And I do think that's unfortunate. I don't have any problem with the placement. I don't necessarily have a problem with the, you know, the physicality of these interpretive materials, because I know the tentative map is locked. But I would, you know, it doesn't even need to be in the reso as far as I'm concerned, but I would encourage something that's a little bit less sort of inside of the museum and a little bit more, you know, contribution to the public aesthetic. Let's think of it that way. Board members, any comment on the subject of the interpretive materials or the gateway monuments compatible design as the catch-all term? Any board members wishing to comment, go ahead and open your mics, please.
Yes, hi, Chair. I just was going to suggest that perhaps there might be ability to vote in different directions if we do break the interpretive materials out to a second vote. I don't think there's going to be a lot of debate about them, but it may allow some latitude for people to vote differently on the different elements should they be separated items.
Does staff have any reaction to that suggestion?
We're thinking. Our silence doesn't mean we're not. I think Ms. Crocker might put on this.
The question was how to handle comments on mitigation measures CUL3 and CUL4. If you wanted to separate it out, I think you could go ahead and take action on the landmark alteration permit. And if you wanted to then take a separate motion, not exactly what that would look like, but a separate motion to approve the 2 mitigation measures, since the mitigation measures do require your consideration, review, and approval. Is that your wish that you would like to separate those out and not have them be included? They're not
I just was, my understanding looking at the agenda was that we had 5 items for us today. Number 3 was the landmark alteration permit, and the remaining 2 were on the mitigation items. So I thought it was already structured that those were going to be separate actions. And it sounds like we're considering rolling it together, or maybe they're already a single action.
They are not a single action right now. If somebody wanted to make a friendly amendment to add in, a condition or a whereas to indicate that the board had reviewed and approved or modified those mitigation measures, we could potentially roll it into this resolution. But if you would like to keep it separate, and as was indicated in the materials, you could just complete the LMA and then make a motion on the 2 mitigation measures.
Yeah, I'm going to break in. I would support doing it that way. I think that the way the resolution is drafted now, it's not exactly clear that it seems like it wouldn't sweep in that anyway. And it's the first time we're seeing these materials. It's a dissimilar posture to these other requests. So unless there's any strong opposition, I would ask us to proceed with the landmark alteration permit, understanding that it does not constitute a decision on approval or disapproval or any other disposition of the interpretive materials or the compatible design or any kind of conclusion about whether those satisfy the mitigation requirements of the mitigation plan for the EIR. So go ahead. I think staff heard someone wanting to speak.
No, that sounds good. I would just remind that I believe there was the friendly amendment before you make a vote, just to clarify.
Sure.
Number 2, the grammatical change.
Yeah, the friendly amendment was proposed, if I'm not mistaken, by board member DeBacher and would need to be adopted by the board member Muser and agreed to by board member Groninga, and that would be a friendly amendment to strike the comma after the word board in condition number 2 on page 2 of the draft resolution, and replace that struck comma with the word and. Board member Muser, that friendly amendment was proposed by board member DeBacher. Do you agree to the friendly amendment?
I didn't make the original motion.
Oh, but you know what? Yeah, I'm getting lost about who made the motion and the second.
I made the motion.
Sorry, board member McHugh. Do you approve or disapprove of the friendly amendment?
I'll approve the friendly amendment.
Board member Groninga, do you concur?
I concur.
Okay. So, board members, any further final comments or questions for staff or the applicant? And then after board members do that, I suppose I'll throw it to staff and the applicant. Any final things before I ask for votes on the landmark alteration permit? Board members first. I'm not seeing anybody. Staff and applicant, Any matters you feel should be resolved or addressed before we take a vote on the resolution?
No comments from staff.
Okay, and I take it the applicant has no final comments. Is that correct?
No final comments.
Okay. All right. So the resolution on the approving the landmark alteration permit that's on the floor was moved by Board Member McHugh, seconded by Board Member Groninga. It includes the minor changes as earlier described to recital F and to condition number 2. Recording secretary, would you please take a roll call vote of the CHB?
Board Member McHugh.
Aye.
Board Member Muser.
Aye.
Board Member Groninga.
Aye.
Board Member Garrett.
Opposed?
Board Member DeBacher.
Nay.
Board Member Fennell.
Nay.
Board Member Chair Edmondson. Chair
Edmondson, you're still on mute.
Well, that wasn't dramatic. That really didn't work. I vote aye, and with that, the resolution passes with 4 ayes and 3 nays. And with that, we'll move on to the interpretive materials and the compatible design features. Boy, I cannot remember that. So I've made my comments, I've spoken my piece about those things, and I'll open it up to anybody else who wishes to elaborate or, I think that this is not reduced to a resolution. It's just going to be, taken up on a motion. So it's kind of an awkward context to, I think, put any kind of particular conditions on it, but I'm sure we could. But, maybe I'd be interested to hear from the applicant about what would be the more convenient way of dealing with this if the board is not inclined to approve either set or any part of either set of these, mitigation materials. So let's just dive in. Board members, if you'll start, does anybody have any comment that they'd wish to share right now regarding those issues? And I've got 2 open mics. I've got Board Member Groninga, Board Member 3 actually, Board Member McHugh, Board Member Groninga, and Vice Chair Fennell. If any of you are wishing to speak, please open your mics and go ahead.
I guess I'm a bit confused, and I'm not sure what we're being asked to do. Is that proposed design something we are supposed to adopt or suggest perhaps that they change? Or
staff can correct me if I'm wrong, or whomever can correct me if I'm wrong. I often am. The City Council's approved mitigation plan for the EIR includes 2 different conditions to do with impact on cultural and historic resources, and the interpretive materials are before us for approval or disapproval as part of the applicant's effort to satisfy condition MMCUL-3. And likewise with the remainder of the Gateway Monument and the other physical features described together with that. Those are the applicant's submissions to us in their attempt to meet the City Council's required mitigation measure.
Yeah, I think you've characterized that accurately. Since you've pulled it out as a separate motion, I think it makes sense probably to do 2 separate ones on each of these items. this would probably be a good time to go through and hear the board members' comments to see what the specific concerns are, what kind of changes may be helpful to this project. And then that would be a good time also to engage the applicant and see if they have any thoughts on that as well. Can they implement those changes or not?
Right. So I'm torn between a couple of different considerations. I never want to make an applicant come back more often than is necessary. But certainly we're entitled to weigh in on these things. It's the first time we're seeing them. I know the tentative plan locks things in and so forth, but to the extent we still have discretion, we're entitled to exercise it, but I'd like to exercise it in a way that doesn't create delays or costs if that can be avoided. So, if it would be simpler to continue this to a date certain or uncertain and have it come back changed with comments or something, that could be one way to go. Because I think that if people have, some kind of broad comments and like a concept level to these things, it's going to be brutal on an oral motion to describe those accurately enough for it to never come back to us.
Yeah, I think the key, excuse me. Oh, no, go ahead, whoever that was.
This is Tina Wallace for the applicants. I apologize again for leaping in there. The council approved these mitigation measures, and certainly you'll want the city attorney to weigh in, but I don't believe legally this board can add conditions of approval to a mitigation measure that's been approved by the city council.
Let me interject, if you don't mind. I mean, it seems in the mitigation measures that these materials must be approved. So we're not really adding a condition. We're acting in the designated role that the council has set forth for us in its legally binding document. If I'm incorrect about that, I can be corrected by the city attorney. And like I said, I've been wrong before.
Certainly, this is Tina Wallace again. You have the ability to approve or the interpretive materials, but to add conditions of approval to the mitigation measure is where I think you can't go.
So I'm sorry to keep interrupting. I apologize, but it would be then your view, your interpretation of those mitigation measures that we would be restricted to an up or down approval vote. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we do respectfully request an up or down decision tonight and not a continuance.
So a down decision would result in non-compliance, temporarily, that there wouldn't be approved materials, and therefore at some point there would have to be a CHB approval, or else the project would be out of compliance, would be my understanding.
Except that this decision could be appealed to the council.
It very well may be. What would the pathway for that be? Because this wouldn't be, it's not part of the landmark alteration permit, where the denial of demolition is appealable expressly under that subsection. So what we're dealing with here is the mitigation language itself that the city council put in. So it very well may be appealable to them. They certainly are the authority that created the language, but I've never encountered that before, and I'm curious.
I think I'll defer to the city attorney on that.
Yeah, this is definitely a bit unusual in the way that this mitigation measure was set up, but I'm looking at the language, and I believe we all are, and it says that, the Cultural Heritage Board shall approve the design prior to issuance of a building permit. And that if this would be by separate motions, I would assume it would be appealable to the city council as an action, although I'm trying to look as we're talking here, but any action that you would take by motion, I would assume would be appealable to the council. So you have time in terms of it has to be approved prior to building permit. I would think that you would have some not to add conditions, as Ms. Wallace said, but to provide your input regarding, the efficacy or your feelings and comments on the mitigations as proposed, since it is written there that you will have to approve these mitigations.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Crocker. That was definitely helpful because it really would pain me to have to, force an appeal to the city council, but I also am just not terribly satisfied with what we're presented with. I can't really see a way out that doesn't come at some sort of expense, and I really am trying to find one.
Chair Edmondson, this is Bill Rose, if I may. I think that what we're hearing is the board is taking issue with what has been presented, but what might be helpful is if there can be some specific suggestions placed on the table that the applicant consider, they could indicate, and perhaps they can implement them as long as we can agree that they are still consistent with that mitigation, that they're not a change of that mitigation. That might be one way forward. You had initially indicated or put a question out about a continuance. Staff would give the same recommendation. If you went to a continuance, we would want to know specifically what the applicant's legal counsel has indicated that they would prefer a vote up or down. I think even in that instance, it probably would be beneficial to everybody to know exactly what those issues are and what solutions may be possible. So
let me jump in. It's just the difficulty is if we recommend changes and then they follow our recommendations, then I'm not sure that we've approved the materials, right? Because they might be physically quite different, honoring our wishes, right? So I'm just trying to dot the I's and cross the T's, and I apologize, but
no, do that. It's the same issue we have with final design review, right? It's where is the board comfortable in saying this is what we would like, and then feeling comfortable that it won't come back to the board for verification, but how will it happen? So that does happen.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps we could delegate the authority that's been granted to us by the council down to staff to, if we have advisory conditions, I'm just speculating. I've not taken the board's temperature about this, but, perhaps we could do it in a similar fashion where we do get to weigh in now, but we also can spare the applicant the need to go before the council or come back before us.
Chairman?
Board Member Groningen, please.
Because this has been kind of an issue for myself. What I'm really looking for, and where I said it was lacking, and quite frankly, I may turn to Board Member DeBacher for some help here. But when I saw or tried to fully understand what was the intent of the interpretive materials, I saw pictures of buildings and little history. I think I was trying to get more clarity and specificity as to, okay, what type of building materials in conformance with the historical nature of the district are you planning to use and where are you going to use them? Beyond that, I wasn't suggesting other than maybe give options on different types, but just tell us what it is that's under consideration in compliance with, say, the guidelines of the district here as to what those interpretive materials are. It's a list, fine, whatever. And that's what I was thinking about, seeking clarity and more specificity.
So I suppose that's a question to the applicant and perhaps staff. If that is that correct, Board Member Groningen? And if so, just ask the applicant and staff to respond.
This is, sorry, go ahead.
Tina Wells, if I could just get Mr. Groninga, I want to make sure, are you asking about putting a list of the types of materials? Is that your question?
I would, in essence, yeah, more specificity. I'm not saying a single list that we have to prove, but tell us what it is you're planning on using and where, and make certain that it's in conformance with the guidelines of the district. That's all.
So,
if I may, I think we're talking about two separate things. So the interpretive materials, if I can read mitigation measure COL3, it states at least 3 sets of interpretive materials related to the history of the property, as well as the broader St. Rose Historic Preservation District, shall be produced and installed. The exact medium of the interpretive materials will not be specified so as not to inhibit creativity, although minimal efforts include panel signage, museum exhibits, or interactive landscape elements such as play elements or site furnishings. And then it specifies where those interpretive materials should be located. And so I'm wondering what you're referring to as far as your question. So
this is Tina Wells again.
In the presentation someplace about the use of stucco, I think some porch setbacks, so on and so forth. All I'm asking for is a little more specificity and where it's going to be used. And I did not find that in that section as one-page graphic, I guess. Maybe it's my own background when I was dealing with buildings and so on and so forth, especially when we got to the exteriors and the cladding of a building or whatever. I owed it to the owners, being a board, to make certain that we specified what we preferred or should use and gave some options. That's all I'm saying.
If I may, this is Amber Grady. I believe what you're looking for, Board Member Groninga, is a combination of 2 documents. That would be the architectural drawings, which specify the different materials in the different areas, as well as the designer review memo that was prepared that specifically speaks to compliance with the design guidelines. And I know the architect can speak more specifically about which elements are being used where, which materials, if you'd like to look at any of the elevations or plans again and ask those specific questions. Am I on the right track?
I don't know. I don't want to belabor the point. To me, it's pretty simple and straightforward what I'm asking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I may, Board Member Groninga, I think that ship has already sailed. I think in approving the landmark alteration permit, we've already had our say on the building. I agree with you. I wish we had more information about what that building was going to be clad in. But to me, the bigger issues were the massing and the size, so I didn't go there myself. If we're looking for the materials of the interpretive materials, which is I thought were originally what you were asking about, I do have one significant concern, and that the city has seen an awful lot of damage and vandalism in the past several months. And my fear is, in particular on the interpretive plaques, that unless some rather extraordinary measures are done, particularly in the environment and the clientele at this one, those plaques aren't going to last very long. And the history of St. Rose will be again spray painted and scratched out in fairly short order. So it would be helpful to us, I think, to understand at least what the plaques are. As far as the gateway arches and the paving, I would like to know a little bit more about the paving that was being offered to the sidewalks. But I think that as a gesture, there's more to the gesture with the gateway pilings and the paving to be a gift to the community And I'm a little bit more comfortable. I wish there were far more mitigation going along with this. But I think that the elements of the durability of the interpretive signs and some more information about what the paving materials were going to be would be helpful for us to move forward.
This is Teresa Ballard from the design team. Can I answer that?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. I want to just be really, really explicit that when we say the interpretive materials, we're literally talking about signs. There are 24 by 36 inch signs, and that graphic sheet that you saw is a picture of what the sign will be that's out there. And that when we're talking about interpretive materials, we're not talking about construction materials. We're talking about, you know, the text and the photographic content. Regarding the sidewalk, all of the sidewalks around this block will have a 2 foot by 2 foot scoring pattern, which is the older city standard for how the sidewalks would be paved. And I hope that answers that question.
I have a question for staff, if I can break in. I know that the staff report broke it down into two things, 4 and 5 in the recommendation section. Number 4, CHB consideration and approval of interpretive materials. So that's just what was described. And 5, consideration and approval of a gateway monument on the north side, and historic urban sidewalk treatments, and historic benches. So it sounds like there's 4 things in 2 different categories, the first of which has 1 thing in it, the interpretive materials, the second of which has 3 things in it, those other things. What's the proper way in which to sort of address those omnibus, 1 by 1, 2 different categories, just so I can make sure that we are discussing everything that we need to discuss right now.
Hi, this is Ashley Crocker. I would think it would make sense to take the 2 mitigation measures one at a time. The first motion for mitigation measure 3 and the second motion for mitigation measure 4 and all of the components therein.
Okay. And I want to ask a question to the applicant team. If the board were going to do an up or down vote on exactly what was presented, those 2 different up or down votes, and the board were to vote not to approve or fail to vote to approve the materials relevant to that condition, what could you describe the impact that would have on you, and how I guess I'm just interested in a little bit more of the context surrounding the decision that we would be making.
This is Tina Wallace. While I'm speaking, I'm going to ask Bert Bangsberg to speak after me. I think, certainly we have to comply with the mitigation measures. That's our obligation legally. We are trying to proceed with construction as soon as possible. Any decision by the DRB can be appealed to the council. So we would be, with the down vote, we would be put in a position where we would have to file an appeal to the council in order to meet a myriad of funding and construction deadlines.
Okay.
And Mr. Bangsberg can elaborate on that. One thought, and it's just a thought, and I would defer to staff and the city attorney, is, with some feedback, could the board defer final approval of compliance with these 2 mitigation measures to staff? And that's just a thought, and it may or may not be acceptable to staff.
Yeah, and let me interject. I mean, I think that, I suppose as a legal matter, strictly speaking, we could never approve it if there was never anything appropriate presented to us. But, we certainly have due process obligations that we owe to all applicants and all members of the public. And so it's impossible that we wouldn't approve something eventually, because eventually it would be proper and it would be a denial of due process and ridiculous for us to not approve it. So I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out there. And then Ms. Wallace asked a question of staff. So I'll yield the floor.
Before staff replies, you may want to hear from Mr. Bangsberg. Part of your packet included a construction schedule because eventually for this project is actually a pretty short time frame. And there are serious impacts from any type of delay. So Mr. Bangsberg, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You're pretty faint, sir, but we can sort of hear you.
How about that?
That's much less faint. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm looking at the mitigation measure right now. And what it really says is that it says on interpretive materials, it says prior to and post construction. Grading is considered construction, and I need a building permit to grade. And we need to get that site graded. So the more this delays, the more we're held up. It doesn't say building permit for the main building permit, which won't come until later in the year. But I need to have asbestos abatement on these buildings. I have to do the lead room. I have permits for all of that. And that has to be done first. So it would just be more delay. And that's why this needs to be up or down.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That was a clear answer. Go ahead, whomever was just trying to get my attention.
My problem with this is we don't know what the materials are proposed for the gate. We have one sign that's approximately 2 by 3. I think we need more detail in order to vote on this. And would the project people be willing to work out the details of the Gateway Monument with the historic district itself?
Chair Edmondson, this is Bill Rose. I want to just go back to the point. It's a critical point. The board obviously has several options: approve, deny, continue, but we really need specific direction. And so I think that's what I would recommend the board to work towards. So board member Garrett just indicated additional materials. That's exactly the kind of things we need to be able to then let the applicant respond, whether they can do that, whether it fits into their schedule, or they simply just need a definitive action. They've indicated that tonight, but I think we really are looking for specific direction on what the issues are and to see if there's any solution therein.
Okay.
If I may, this is Kristen Toomey, Senior Planner. The attachment 13 does call out the materials that are proposed for the Gateway Monument with the ornamental concrete cap, natural stone veneer. It specifically calls out the type of color and the brass plaque. So those are specifically called out. And then the MMRP for the interpretive materials describes how many signs there has to be. It's very specific. So the first one has to be at the Catholic Charities entrance area, the second one, the home's entrance area, and the third, the entrance near the parking lot. So it's not just one sign, it would be 3. But the mitigation measure does offer some ability to be creative as to what those plaques or, whatever it might be, what those could be. So just wanted to add that.
This is Tina Wallace. If I could follow up on Mr. Rose's comments in a moment. First, I would just like to echo what Ms. Toomian said. The Gateway Monument design, it is well structured. There is a lot of information there. And just for the board's comfort level, We didn't actually design that. We mimicked exactly what's in the Northern Downtown Pedestrian Linkage Study, and we tried to be as faithful as possible to what was already in an approved plan. So what we proposed exactly conforms to what is in the approved plan, which is what we believe the council had in mind when it added this requirement. And secondly, we really, again, request very respectfully a decision tonight, or alternatively a delegation to staff to make the final decision, because of the very severe time pressures and funding pressures for this project.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. So is it the opinion of the city attorney, opinion might be the wrong word to use, is it the view of the city attorney that we have the power to delegate some amount of future review or discretion to staff, and that will constitute satisfaction of the conditions for purposes of covenants in construction and loan documents and that sort of thing? I know you're not making any representations about contracts to which the city's not a party. That's not what I'm asking. I'm just asking whether that still is an approval.
Hi, this is Ashley Crocker. Yes, I think that would suffice if we could, again, as Mr. Rose has continued to ask for direction then to staff. So if it's delegation to staff, what is the direction to staff? What are you looking for? I think that that's still the question on the board, whether board member Tabaka is trying to interject. So either way, you need to know what you are looking for, either for the applicant to be able to satisfy it tonight, or for us to be able to delegate to staff. I mean, even if there were a continuance, there would have to be direction in order to come back. Okay.
Let me go through the board members, and let's go mitigation measure by mitigation measure. And let's start with the interpretive materials, which is the sign that'll be the same in 3 places. I don't agree that the mitigation measure calls for signs in those 3 places. I do certainly agree that those 3 places are cited specifically, but I think that having the same exact kind of feature in those 3 places is not required and is not of use to the public. I don't think it's the way to convey the sort of historic fabric of the parts of the site that or the improvements on the site that are no longer there. So my inclination would be to make an approval that involves staff being able to take into account the comments that we make here that are non-binding, but we are entitled to comment on this, and quite frankly, to put it plainly, the city council didn't write, or the city council adopted measures that were not written in a smart way, because we've got that pre-permit condition that the applicant just mentioned, and then we are expected to comment and approve on things we've never been able to talk about with each other because of the Brown Act. So it's ridiculous. So what I am concerned with is having a little bit more variety and actually just improve it. I think the narrative is fine. I don't have any problem with the academic quality of it, but I don't know how well they would serve as interpretive materials. And I do not want to make anybody come back. I do not want it to not constitute an approval. I don't want there to be an appeal. I would like the materials to be better in the final project. It's as simple as that. And I'd be happy to delegate as much discretion as legally permitted to staff. Now I'm going to go board member by board member. Again, we're on the interpretive materials. Board member Muser, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yes, I'm ready to approve it as well, and give staff the ability to, as the chair said, negotiate some better materials.
Okay, thank you. Board member McHugh.
I'm supportive of what you said and having giving staff the discretion to do final approval, working with the applicant.
So just to clarify, the word approval has significance. So the way I'm envisioning this is a motion to approve, and then the vote is taken, and it constitutes approval, but it doesn't fix the exact physical nature and look of these interpretive materials. That's what I had in mind, and I'll turn it back over.
And I understand that, and I'm supportive of that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Board Member McHugh. Board Member Groninger.
I would support that as well. What I think we're talking about is that we'd be giving a conceptual approval to interpretive materials, the monument, so on and so forth. But the details left for the staff to act on or to execute. And I'm okay with that.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Groninger. Board Member Garrett.
I would like to see the gateway material be.
Can I break in? I'm sorry. I just want to be really rigid about this. We're going mitigation measure by mitigation measure, and the gateway monument is part of the next one. So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
So this is for the interpretive material. I would go with staff discretion.
Thank you, Board Member Garrett. Board Member DeBacher. Any reactions or feelings on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Let me say that my primary concern with the interpretive materials is I definitely understand the difference between interpretive materials and materials. And my concern was the durability and longevity and maintainability of these interpretive materials. If these are going to be a brass plaque that's colorized and has raised letters, that's one thing. Could that be maintained? If it's another, if it is printed on a t-shirt and put under a thick sheet of plexiglass, it's another. We don't know what they're going to do here, and that is concerning to me. I'm also ashamed of the City Council of defining specifically what we had to approve for them, and without putting it in our purview to have the say on that. It's not the way to approach this. So as far as the interpretive materials go, it's an extremely feeble gesture as long as it's durable and that the staff is satisfied that the people who are going to be maintaining it, which I don't know will be them or not, will be able to remove graffiti and damage and vandalism. I'm not going to have a problem with that.
All right, thank you, Board Member DeBacher and Vice Chair Fennell. Any thoughts?
I have had just a foul taste in my mouth for 5.5 hours now with this whole thing, and just feel like, it's like, what do you bring? What kind of wine do you bring once you bulldoze 5 homes? I mean, it's just, I'm going to let the city take it doesn't matter because it's all going to get approved, and we're not going to have any say in it really anyway, because if they don't like what we say, they're going to go to the City Council. So have at it.
All right. So let me turn it to staff. There were many comments made, Board Member DeBacher, durability. I was, raising the issue of having sort of no variation from sign to sign. And earlier I mentioned the sort of lack of reflection of the actual appearance of the buildings that would, with the most historic value that would be lost in this project. If staff disagrees or the applicant that's not a sufficient degree of instruction or indication of our preferences, please let me know. But what I would have in mind would be to solicit a motion approving the interpretive materials, provided that there has to be, some sort of due consideration given to each of these comments, because they sound like the consensus of the board. Nobody contradicted any other board member's comment. So I think that, for staff to, not approve, but sort of, keep the approval intact, so to speak. I'm welcome to use the proper language, the proper word, that there just has to be some sort of good faith effort to at least think about these things, and not even to take any particular action. But if everything's completely ignored and you show up with a blank piece of paper and everything's the same, then it would be nice if that was a problem. So that's my thinking, and I'm happy to hear what staff has to say.
Yeah, Chair Edmondson, this is Bill Rose. Yeah, you've heard me now several times go back to this point. I really feel that this isn't enough direction, and it isn't just for staff, but it's also for the applicant and the applicant's team. The durable materials, we could pick one, and it's not really to the satisfaction of the board, and that's problematic. Our charge, when it's deferred to staff, is to implement what the board wants. We do this, like I mentioned, frequently at Design Review Board. To do that, and also not just for us, as I mentioned, but for the applicant, we would need as specific as direction as you can possibly give us. And so right now, I feel that we do not have that. We'd also want to inquire with the applicant to see if they understand it, because they're going to be left with walking away from this and going and trying to address it. And I would ask that we hear from them to see if they have enough information. I personally do not feel we have that at this point.
This is Tina Wallace for the applicants. We do feel that we have sufficient information. We do appreciate all of the board members' input. We have sufficient information, and we're willing to proceed with the conceptual approval, subject to staff confirming that we have given very serious consideration and done our best to be responsive to the board's comments.
Yeah, that sounds very productive, and I think that maybe will let us move forward to the motion. I think, a good faith effort to comply with, as much of what the board has expressed concern about as possible. That's what would be expected, but it would not be a condition precedent to the approval that's required under the mitigation plan. That's what I have in mind. So
can
staff,
we make it so that the applicant does maintain something in there, that the applicant maintains these things, and that it's there. They're going to be a lot more wanting to make sure that it's a good material and it's something easy to clean and something long lasting if it's something that they are going to take the responsibility to maintain and see to it that it is cared for.
I think that's definitely a legitimate concern. I wonder if staff or the applicant would think that that's already going to be a requirement that's enforceable against the project. If it falls into disrepair, these aspects of it, right now we're considering them separately, but if and when they are constructed, I would suspect that they would just be, a component of nuisance or blight or graffiti abatement or whatever problem is on there. It doesn't matter if it's on a sign or a building. It does sometimes, but what I'm getting at is that it's an improvement on property that's subject to maintenance obligations that are enforceable by the city. Any comment on that from staff or the applicant?
This is Tina Wallace for the applicant. Because these are mitigation measures that are mitigating environmental impacts, mitigation measures are enforceable under CEQA, and we would maintain them, but certainly the city can require us to maintain them because that's the offset to the environmental impact. So we do have to maintain them. We can't simply let them suffer for any benign or intentional neglect or destruction.
Chair Edmonds, this is Bill Rose, and I concur with what Ms. Wallace just said. I think at this point, what staff would request is a readback of the specific items that staff is charged with implementing. Make sure, and this is a typical practice that we do frequently, make sure then that staff is clear, make sure that the applicant is clear, and then we can move forward with the vote on this. So, and the other reason for that is so that we can also accurately capture this in the record.
Good, yeah, that's good.
Secretary.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Bill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a very quick rerun through every board member. And I suppose what I would ask you to start brainstorming is a way to, give sort of directional instruction to staff and the applicant for, how to respond to different concerns that you have. Maybe start out the way you phrase it with a verb, like, increase or decrease or enhance or this, that, or the other thing. And then try to break them up by subject. So if you have more than one thing, don't use a compound sentence, use separate sentences. So I'll start. I would wish to encourage that the visual depictions of 520 Morgan Street and 608 Morgan Street are the most prominent, become more prominent on any signage that's used as interpretive materials. I would also like to see just a shortening of the text to aid readability, because the text is too small for anybody to care about or read, even though it is good. And I would also encourage that not identical interpretive materials be placed at the 3 sites, and that additional consideration be given to substituting at least 2 of those locations with interpretive materials that are, of a different sort. Although it occurs to me that, that's extremely open-ended, but, it's just, I do feel a bit frustrated about what position we've been put in by the council. We can circle back and clean these up at the end, but let me move it on to Board Member DeBacher and then down the line. Can anybody hear me? I'm not hearing anyone.
We're hearing you.
Okay, I didn't hear anything for the last 30 seconds. So I was wishing to give Board Member DeBacher the floor.
Thank you. I just got the ability to do that. Thank you, Chair. I think your ideas are very sound in having 3 different sets of interpretive, and in fact, geographically placed. One may be better to emphasize the district, one that plays up on the hospital block, and one that emphasizes the 2 buildings that were lost. May be an appropriate way to do that, just to magnify it. You've heard my main concern that whatever materials that they're going to construct the interpretive materials of be durable, and I may make it a personal goal to come out and check periodically. Other than that, it is what it is.
Okay, great. Thank you, Board Member DeBacher. I'm going to keep going down the line, and we'll reconcile any irreconcilable things and clean up any cleanups in my comments or anyone else's at the end. Vice Chair Fennell, I'm suspecting you may not have anything to add, because you seemed like you were quite past it during your last remarks. But
kind of crabby. I must be hangry. No, I don't have anything to add. I think that what you said was very succinct, and I'm fine with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Fennell. Board Member Garrett.
I agree with the previous comments on dividing into three sections. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Board Member McHugh.
I'm supportive of your comments and also Board Member DeBacher in terms of the materials that they're substantial and will be taken care of.
Okay, thank you, Board Member McHugh. Board Member Muser.
I also agree with all the previous comments.
Thank you. Board Member Groningen, please.
I agree with the comments specifically from Chair Edmonds and Board Member DeBacher, and to each and every one of my colleague board members, I apologize for putting us on this path by misinterpreting interpretive materials. I sincerely apologize.
Thank you. No apology necessary. I think we needed to have this discussion anyway, because that's the way the legal sources came from different places. So I think I can take it back to a sum up. And I think before I ask staff, Mr. Rose, I would just like to speak with Board Member DeBacher, because it sounds like you had more of your comment went to the idea of the 3 different locations that are specified in the condition, perhaps separating out and maybe supplementing the materials and the text that we see in the interpretive materials we were given. Maybe reallocating those so that 3 signs are unique. If it happens to be signage, that the 3 signs are unique and that they're located so that their visual depictions and narratives are seen by people in the context most likely to convey historic meaning to them. I think that's an excellent idea. I am completely on board with that way of putting it, and I don't think that 3 signs would be, a deal breaker for me. And I think that, as badly as I want to, take advantage of some of these other types of interpretive materials, if I try to put anything in about landscape or things like that, it's just going to be completely unwieldy. So as far as I'm concerned, I think Board Member DeBacher's comments sort of subsume my comments. He made the additional remark regarding durable materials. So, Mr. Rose, it seems like now that I've gone through that, assuming there's no board objections, we've got kind of 2 thrusts, basically more variety, a little more sensitivity to, conveying historic meaning, no prohibition on 3 signs of those dimensions, fine. And then to, make materials decisions with particular consideration given to durability. Mr. Rose?
Actually, this is Kristen A. I just need a little bit more direction. I understand you want 3, you'd be okay with 3 different signs with 3 different content that are more tailored to perhaps what was there or what's close by to those interpretive materials. I guess I just need more direction as to what do you consider a durable material? Also, how large should these signs be? What are you envisioning in terms of size and height? That would be really helpful.
Let me break in first. I will defer to Mark on the materials question about durability. I would want to just interject about the size question that the important thing I think would be that the text is conveniently readable to the public, including from a bit of a distance. And this is why the City Council, and it's the 3rd time I've said it, did this wrong, because it's very difficult to come up with language that is adequately instructive about that right now for me. But you know, I guess, you know, if, you know, a person with 20/20 vision standing X feet away has to be able to read 90% of the words or something. I mean, really, it's getting ridiculous. I would at some point just request that staff or the applicant simply state language that we can consider adopting.
Yeah, I think we're very close to that. We obviously 3 unique signs, that's very clear. The durable materials, I think we will work with the applicant and their architects team to come up with the most durable materials feasible. And then the last one, I'm working through the language. I'm probably not going to get it very clear at this late hour, but I think the intent is clear with the board, is that those signs shall be placed in locations where the message of the sign is contextually related to the location itself as best possible. I think that's what you're indicating, and I think implement that.
That sounds like a home run from my point of view, Bill. Board Member DeBacher, any other board members? This might be the last chance to get your say in, because I will not be asking for further discussion after the motion is made. So any further comments, and then we're going to move on to the gateway monuments and the rest of it. Board Member DeBacher first, and then anyone else.
For the recording secretary, would it be possible to get the snapshot view of the board members? Chair Edmondson, would you mind repeating your direction? I think it was related to Board Member DeBacher.
Yeah, I just said, Bill, that was a masterful job of distilling the direction of the board in the context of the motion to approve that is anticipated. And I wanted to give the board one final opportunity to comment on Mr. Rose's most recent formulation, which I found quite satisfactory in terms of summing up our prior comments. Board Member DeBacher, since you had a significant input, if you could please weigh in, and then I will ask any other board member wishing to speak to open their mics and make comment. And then if I see no mics open, then I'm going to ask a motion to be made to approve the interpretive materials, subject to the expression of the board's sentiments as stated by Mr. Rose. Board Member DeBacher, please.
Thank you. I'm sorry I had to step away there briefly. My pet was about to get hurt, so I had to get them out of danger over there.
I think we're all about to get hurt.
Anyways, I think that what was put out was going to be appropriate. I may not vote in favor, mostly because I think that in total the two mitigation measures before us are a tiny fraction of the mitigation that would normally be imposed if this was a federal or state project. And I'm not comfortable with the mitigation measures that were being imposed from above to us. But I think we're doing the best with what we have before us, and I think the comments made were fine.
Can I ask a question to the city attorney? If a motion is brought and it fails, is there generally any kind of availability of a motion to reconsider? Let's spend very little time on this because we haven't gotten to any such point, but I'm just curious.
In this hearing, no. I would have to go and look at the motion to consider, but no.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other board members besides Board Member DeBacher wishing to comment on Mr. Rose's formulation or anything else to do with this subject matter before I request a motion? Not seeing anybody. Does any board member wish to make a motion to approve the interpretive materials, whatever further elaboration staff requires, but the interpretive materials that were part of the agenda packets publicly available during this meeting. Motion to approve that with the additional distillation of sentiment of the board, which staff will, help me out, staff. If you think it's inadequate, tell me what to say that's adequate, and we'll get the motion made.
I think you could just reiterate what I had indicated previously. Just carry that forward. We've got that in the record, and that should capture it.
Yeah, so I would just like to make a reference to your most recent comprehensive statement and not have to repeat it because I can't. And so I'd be asking you to repeat it if I couldn't do that. So, nor can I verbatim, but I think that we've got it captured, and we can go back and get it, and we will have it verbatim. Okay, is any board member willing to so move to approve the interpretive materials?
So move as most recently stated.
Okay, the motion was made by Board Member Groningen. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, the motion was made by Board Member Groningen and seconded by Board Member McHugh. Recording Secretary, would you please take a vote of the CHP, please?
Okay, McHugh?
Aye.
Muser?
Aye.
Groninga? Board Member Groninga?
Kurt, we couldn't hear your vote because your mic was off. Could you, if the recording secretary so pleases, could you repeat your vote?
Aye.
Garrett?
Aye.
DeBacher?
I'll go nay.
Fennel?
Nay.
Edmondson?
And I vote aye. I'm not confident that I heard every vote correctly. I would ask the recording secretary to please summarize the outcome of the vote.
Board Member McHugh voted aye. Board Member Muser voted aye. Board Member Groninga voted aye. Board Member Garrett voted aye. Board Member DeBacher voted no. Vice Chair Fennel voted no. Chair Edmondson voted aye.
Okay, so the motion carries by a vote of 5-2, and let's move on to the final subjects for consideration, which is all of the aspects of the project that are under our purview with respect to the fourth mitigation measure derived from the EIR. Once again, the recommendation section of the staff report breaks it down into a handful of discrete object types, the gateway monuments, and then I think the sidewalk and benches, right? So, I want to make sure that, we get this over with properly, regardless of the outcome. So I want to make sure we're discussing the right things and that we can take a similar vote and do it quicker than we did the last one. So could I get a little bit of feedback from staff or the applicant on, what is the universe of stuff that is subject to our review that is intended to satisfy this mitigation measure?
Chair Edmondson, this is Bill Rose. To put it another way, are you asking what your purview is in terms of
Right. Well, yeah, let me interrupt. I am asking because we have chosen to go about this by breaking it down into mitigation measure by mitigation measure, not into physical object by physical object, for instance. So for us to actually comment, which is what we need to do according to the city council instructions to satisfy the condition, if we are never informed that something is a subject of commentary, then we can't comment on it. So I want to understand what are all the subjects of commentary.
Tumians, would you mind itemizing those per the mitigation?
Yes, I'd be happy to. All right, it says, the applicant shall provide a small gateway monument on the north side of intersections 7th and A, consistent with the Northern Pedestrian Linkage Study. Additionally, the project shall incorporate the use of historic urban sidewalk treatments, historic benches within the project area. And the design is, it's subject to CHB approval. So we have the gateway, we have the sidewalk treatments, and the historic benches.
Chair Edmondson, you're on mute.
You're muted.
Thank you, Ms. Tumians. That is exactly how it was stated in the staff report, and I appreciate you confirming that. Board members, any comments? You know, same kind of thing we just did for the prior one. If the board were to, you know, want things to change, the interest is to have clear instruction, and you know, the applicant is not interested in any kind of outcome that is not decisive. So whether it's a rejection, an up or down vote, or what have you, or similar to what we just did, that is the field of play. And Board Member Walker, if you would pick things like this.
Thank you, Chair. Very simply, I find no objection to these items. These are very appropriate elements. It's a shame that they're not a small element of a very, very much larger mitigation package. The only comment I have is that I think it's important that the graffiti-proof coating on the stone elements, particularly the gateway elements, is going to be very important, and that be maintained because they will probably be frequently decorated. That's really my only comment. I think that, again, these are appropriate mitigations. I just wish there was a much bigger package that came with it.
Thank you, Board Member DeBacher. Vice Chair Fennell.
I am fine with these.
Oh my God. Thank you, Vice Chair Fennell. That was not directed at you, it was directed at me. And now you're muted, so I couldn't hear your answer. Which is hilarious. That's how it has to go, right? Board Member Garrett, if you can hear me and you're not muted, if you could share any thoughts you might have.
I'm okay with most of it, although I don't believe we saw a photo of the historic type benches. I would ask the applicant to consider the gateways to be a basalt material, which is used throughout the district, and it is a more appropriate material for the stone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Board Member Garrett. Could we quickly address the comment regarding a visual depiction of the benches? Are there any photographs? Are there any drawings? I seem to have recalled a drawing, but I do think Board Member Garrett is correct that there were no photographs. But if you could just point us to those, that would be helpful.
If you can go to the landscape drawing, I think sheet 3 of the landscapes, the benches are there.
Okay, thanks very much. let's move on to Board Member Groningen, please.
I concur with comments, Board Member Garrett and DeBacher.
All right, yeah. I mean, this is what happens when it's 1 a.m. I was just thanking Board Member Groningen and Board Member McHugh. Any comments, please?
I support Board Member DeBacher's comments and the other comments from my colleague, whose name is Gavin.
But, you know, nobody's quite at the top of their game right now. I think it's pretty admirable how well everybody's doing. I suppose I'll just move on to Board Member Muser, if you don't object, Board Member McHugh.
No, not at all.
I support all the previous comments as well.
And I am probably missing somebody because I cannot see people's faces right now, but great. I believe that is everyone. Board Member DeBacher, you've had a chance, obviously, to speak. Okay. I wanted to make an observation. Thank you, Board Member Garrett, for bringing up the benches, because I do think I saw those, but I hadn't really recalled what they looked like, and I think they're attractive. And this might be outside the scope of the actual, mitigated thing, which I guess, the mitigation is to do with historic resources and historic character. But those benches, I guess, I understand sort of, but the armrest in the middle, for me, it just sort of rubs me the wrong way. It seems unwelcoming as sort of an anti-homeless design, which is ironic. In my opinion, I'm not saying that motivated anybody's choice. It will send that message. I suppose that it's not really to do with mitigating historic, detriments or what have you. So I won't bother, I suppose, suggesting any language about it, except, what the hell, I'm going to suggest language about it. I would encourage reconsideration of the bench to be historically appropriate style that is not designed in a manner to cause discomfort in a reclined position. And I suppose we can go to Mr. Rose to figure out if we've got enough clarity to move forward on a motion.
I think we do. I'm writing and thinking, trying to capture it all. I heard consider use, and I think it's a consider, perhaps it's a shall, Board Member Garrett. Consider use of basalt stone as it is a material that is commonly used in the vicinity. I heard consider modification to the bench to be more ergonomically comfortable, something along those lines in the reclined position. And then I would ask Board Member DeBacher to maybe clarify. I didn't capture all of what he had said.
Hi, Bill. I didn't really have that many comments other than to ensure that the beautiful pilaster gateway signs have a graffiti-proof coating on them. It would be the only thing that I was really asking for on those. Oh, and let's have 700 benches, since they gave us that opportunity that they haven't mentioned. No, kidding. Sorry, strike that.
Okay, so we can get that last one, pilaster signs to be graffiti proof or graffiti resistant, to include a graffiti proof or graffiti resistant material. We can do that. Yes, so that's clear.
Okay, so Mr. Rose, I'm going to ask for a motion to be made to approve I suppose the improvements that have just been under discussion related to that mitigation measure with the post-approval sentiment directions of the board as Mr. Rose just recapitulated them. Is any board member willing to make that motion?
Just Chair Edmondson, very quickly, if we could just make sure the applicant understood those and is also okay with those and can accept them.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Rose.
Yes, we understand them and they're fine. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is any board member wishing to make a motion to approve the aforementioned improvements with respect to mitigation measure 4, the approval subject to the, well, not subject to the approval paired with the what Mr. Rose described as the sentiments of the board? Is any board member willing to so make that motion? And feel free to just open your mic up and make the motion, or if nobody's wishing to move, then I will make the motion.
I will do it. Can someone read it for me, though?
I don't know if any of this is even written in the first place.
Okay, then I will make the motion. That we accept the
motion. The motion as I described it before I solicited. Okay.
Exactly.
Staff, is that adequate?
Yes, that's adequate. Thank you.
Okay, the motion was made by Vice Chair Fennell. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Board Member Muser. Board members, any final comments or questions before I ask the recording secretary to take a roll call vote? Not seeing any. Recording secretary, please take a roll call vote.
Board Member McHugh.
Aye.
Board Member Muser.
Aye.
Board Member Groninger.
Aye.
Board Member Garrett.
Aye.
Board Member DeBacher.
Aye.
Vice Chair Fennell.
Aye.
Chair Edmondson.
I also vote aye. That motion carries unanimously, and that is the conclusion of that item. Thank you very much to the applicant team. Congratulations. And staff, one step further along what's been a long road, and we're all grateful for your hard work, and you guys are always impressive. So thanks very much. We do have 2 more items, believe it or not, and I don't think anybody has the slightest interest in doing anything for those. But we've got board member reports followed by department reports. I'm going to take the liberty of skipping board member reports, and let's just go right to department reports, please.
There are no department reports for tonight.
All right, and that concludes the joint meeting of the Design Review Board and the Cultural Heritage Board. We will adjourn to our next regularly scheduled Cultural Heritage Board meeting. Design Review Board will have upcoming meetings as per the city's public whatever, and that's it. Have a lovely morning, everybody.